So glad to have you back for this week's study in the Sermon on the Mount. Today we're looking at Matthew 5:43 through 47. So please follow along as I read. You have heard that it was said, love your neighbors and hate your enemy. But I tell you, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you, that you may be children of your Father in heaven. He causes his sun to rise on the evil and the good, and sends rain on the righteous and the unrighteous. If you love those who love you, what reward will you get? Are not even the tax collectors doing that? And if you greet only your own people, what are you doing more than others? Do not even pagans do that? Following a disastrous day of battle for Union forces on December 13th, 1863, 7,000 soldiers lay wounded in front of the Confederate lines in Fredericksburg, Virginia. All through the night, they moaned and called for help, but none dare give them any aid for fear of being shot by snipers. Finally, a Confederate soldier named Sergeant Richard Kirkland, a devout Christian from South Carolina, couldn't stand it any longer. He went to Brigadier General Joseph B. Kershaw and asked for permission to take water to the wounded. The general refused, and he said, you can't do that because you'll be killed. And Kirkland continued to say, please let me do something. The general said, Kirkland, don't you know you will get a bullet through your head the moment you step over the wall? To which Kirkland replied, yes, sir, I know that, but if you will let me, I'm willing to try. Kirkland was allowed to use a white handkerchief to signal a truce, and having gathered all the canteens he could, he went from soldier to soldier, giving them life-giving water. Though they were his enemies, and though each one of them would have killed him had they had the chance the day before, Kirkland went to them and gave them the water they needed to comfort them. For his actions, he became known as the Angel of Mary's Heights, which was the place where the battle took place. Loving those in our family is natural. The bonds of affection and commitment are strengthened over time by shared experiences and goals, living in a small community of humans where we learn to give and take, receive, and sacrifice in relationship with each other. That's the way God made families to work, and not just families, but neighborhoods, communities, and certainly like in our church family as well. We learn to share. We learn to get to know each other. It's our families are the basic unit in civilization, and they have the most profound impact on an individual. And again, right, we extend this to the church family as well. It's generally a rule that if the family is not right, the family members will not be right. And how often have we seen that? How many of us who have come from families where things have not been good have struggled with that through our lives and have worked to try to overcome that? And how many of us have tried to provide a good family for those that we love because we know how important it is? Love is best modeled and learned in a family. And this is true regardless of what station in life, what country we are. It doesn't matter what country you are. The family is very important. No matter what ethnic group you belong to or what language is spoken, where there's whether there sorry, I can't get it out. Uh, whether there's chaos or prosperity, if it exists uh, in the home, those conditions, it has effect on the individual. For someone to love and another family member is natural. It's unnatural not to love a family member. Loving those who join our circle of friends, as well as an extended family, is one of those joys of life. But again, this is universal and expected. For example, when our grown children marry, we take in the in-laws and we love them. And when they have children, we extend our love to our grandchildren. We extend that love and so on, and we widen our circle. While affirming the rightness of these kinds of love, Jesus again drilled deeper, insisting that we love our enemies. He did not define who the enemies were or the motivation they had for being our enemies. Sometimes the enemies are those of another nation. They hate someone uh, just because they're from this place or that place, or because of the history that exists. We certainly see that in the Middle East right now, where the hatred goes back for generations. But most often, enemies are made in the course of living. At some point, someone who perhaps was once close fell out with us over some disagreement, or what was once affection has turned into an intense hatred. We've certainly seen that with couples who break up, and those who once loved now are at the point of hatred. Or it could have been someone who was neutral, but over time they sort of made a little catalog of reasons why they dislike us, allowing that to blossom into some sort of hatred or resentment. There's all sorts of things that come to mind for them. We know that someone who is an enemy, when they uh, are in our presence, our actions, our reputation is enough to inflame their feelings of resentment toward us, of feeling like they don't want to be around us, or they just their feelings rise, or maybe ours rise. They wish harm for us and may even be motivated to cause harm to us themselves. Our misfortune is when we have misfortune, it's a reason for them to rejoice. Our failures cause them to have celebration. We can feel that. We maybe see that. Yet Jesus told us we must love people like this, who rejoice in what goes wrong with our lives. And speaking of loving them, Jesus indicated we are to love them with a stronger love than they can hate. The Greek word is a familiar word, agape. We often hear it in Christian circles. That unselfish and all giving love that characterized Jesus' love for the disciples and what he expected them to love him in return is to act in the best interests of our enemy. Dietrich Bonhoeffer, that wonderful German teacher who died during World War II at the hands of Hitler, said, "No sacrifice which a lover would make for his beloved is too great for us to make for our enemy." Think about that. No sacrifice, I'm going to read that again. No sacrifice which a lover would make for his beloved is too great to make for our enemy. That's pretty powerful. Let me give you an example of this that we saw in our country a few years back. It can make a profound impact. On October 2nd, 2006, in Lancaster County, Pennsylvania, a lone gunman entered a one-room schoolhouse. Taking hostages, he shot 8 out of 10 girls, killing 5 of them before killing himself. The small community of peace-loving Amish, and for those not familiar with the Amish, let me just explain. The Amish are a community of people who have pretty much they don't do modern things. They don't have electricity. They're a Christian community. They don't have electricity. They use old farming methods. They use horses instead of tractors and that kind of thing. And they're peace loving. They won't fight in wars, and they don't take revenge and so on. They live a very peaceful life. Anyway, so just to understand that there's quite a bit about them, but that's just a couple of quick things. The small community of these peace-loving Amish were shocked at the senselessness of the act, and because they were pacifists and their Amish beliefs were challenged, but their response embodied the grace that Jesus is talking about. Let me quote from a news report. On the day of the shooting, a grandfather of one of the murdered Amish girls was heard warning some young relatives not to hate the killer, saying, "We must not think evil of this man." Another Amish father noted, He had a mother, talking about the man who did the killing. He had a mother and a wife and a soul, and now he's standing before a just God. Jack Meyer, a member of the Brethren community living near the Amish in Lancaster County, explained, I don't think there's anybody here that wants to do anything but forgive and not only reach out to those who have suffered a loss in that way, but to reach out to the family of the man who committed these acts. And continuing this quote, a family spokesman said an Amish neighbor comforted the gunman's, listen to this, a family spokesman said an Amish neighbor comforted the gunman's family hours after the shooting and extended forgiveness to them. Amish community members visited and comforted Robert's, that's a gunman, Robert's widow, parents, and parents-in-law. One Amish man held the gunman's sobbing father in his arms, reportedly for as long as an hour, to comfort him, the killer. The Amish have also set up a charitable fund for the family of the shooter. About 30 members of the Amish community attended the gunman's funeral, and the widow of the killer was one of the few outsiders invited to the funeral of one of the victims. That's the kind of love that Jesus was talking about that we are to have for our enemies. A love that the world cannot make sense of outside of the grace of God. Paul several times reminded believers that they had been the enemies of God. We have been the enemies of God, but we were reconciled through Christ. Our sin was not only harmful to us and to the people around us, but whether or not we realized it, they were hateful acts toward God. But he loved us. Remember what Romans 5:8 says, but God demonstrates his own love for us in this: while we were still sinners, Christ died for us. Ought we not to love our enemies if Christ has loved us? And that, my friends, is our challenge, and that is where we should go in our way to act toward our enemies. God bless you.